People don't just vanish off the face of this planet. So where is he?
We got a call saying if you don't stop pursuing this, we'll have you killed.
This series is so fascinating, and I'm in New Jersey, so the New Jersey episode was particularly
There you
scary.
go.
So I know you and Jay, are probably inundated with projects. People want you to produce their stuff. So
Yeah.
how did you choose this project?
Well, it was sort of an organic process because we made a documentary with this team called Sasquatch for Hulu. And it was through that we discovered, wow, yes, Sasquatch is an interesting cryptid, but there are so many more stories. And when that documentary series came out, we were just hit with some people, but do you know about the goat man? Do you know about the lizard people? And I'm not really a conspiracy theorist person, so this was kind of like, I don't consider myself an expert at all. It was new for me and it was an education. But what I am is a documentary filmmaker, and I believe as long as you approach your subjects with a level of dignity and a level of respect, and you don't make fun of them and you honor their truth and meet them where they're at, like fascinating things tend to come from it, so for me, it was kind of a no-brainer to continue to explore this, because at the end of the day, whether you believe that Sasquatch did tear these people limb from limb in the woods, or it was someone who tore these people limb from limb, and they really wanted to make people believe it was Sasquatch because they wanted to instill fear in them, or whether it was someone else who tore them limb from limb and is in denial and needs to believe that it was Sasquatch who did it. All of those truths are fascinating to me. And all we had to do was chase down these stories and see what revealed themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And how did you, there's so many conspiracy theories
Yeah.
out there, so how did you like narrow it down to this group?
It was an interesting process. We had a lot of researchers, and they did a really good job seeking out stories, fielding incoming calls on things. And what we found was that there seemed to be a plethora of different cryptids and experiences that were worth exploring. And immediately we put some of them away because they were older stories that had already been told, and we didn't want to repeat any of those things. So that took a chunk out. And then some had a fascinating subject at the center of it, but there was no real human story that we could connect to, because ultimately I don't really come from the genre space. I like personal stories and human stories. So if I didn't have that to go with the creature and the cryptid stuff, to me, it wasn't really worthwhile. So it was almost like we started at the top of a wide funnel and they just started slowly but surely canceling themselves out until it got down to this 8. And certainly there were more that are worth exploring, and we hope we'll get a season 2 to continue on. But these really had that wonderful mix of fascinating human story, combined with like a truly interesting, genre creature element.
And have you experienced anything supernatural, or have you believed in aliens like growing up maybe? Like have you had any experiences that you try to tell people and they're like, Mark, like come on.
No, I'm really not like that. And this is what's great about this show. And that's why I invite the cynics and the skeptics into the show, because you don't need to be a conspiracy theorist to enjoy this show. You don't need to believe in any of this stuff, But I will bet if you are one of those people who is cynical and skeptical, I will bet there is something that you are not even aware represents some little belief. I'll give you an example of one of mine. I grew up Catholic in New Orleans, and I was indoctrinated with all that stuff, but pretty quickly figured out it wasn't for me and I didn't believe it, and that's fine, right? Cut to, I'm like 12 years old. I'm at like a slumber party and a friend of mine brings out the Ouija board, and immediately I have a violent reaction. I'm like, no, don't do that. And they're like, I thought you didn't believe in it. I'm just like, just in case, like we just don't mess with it. There is this little part of us. Is it that we want to believe? I don't know what it is. Or is that we're just being safe or careful? But I will say this, I have come across too many incredibly rational seeming people who will look me in the eye and say something that sounds utterly ridiculous. Yes, I was just driving down the street and I did not have any alcohol. I did not have any weed. And I saw a man out in the field, and the bottom half of his body was that of a goat. And they're not a crazy conspiracy theorist person. They were just normal. And so I don't know. To me, that's like the very worth opening the lid on.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? Like when there's a lot of, accounts, like the goat one is a little more niche than like aliens, but there's so
Yeah.
many accounts of UFOs. It's kind of like, is there something to it? And there's almost a weird comfort to blaming aliens on certain things. And yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
and I think when people watch this show, even if they aren't walking away convinced, which is not the goal of the show, it's not to
right.
convince, just to present.
Yeah.
I hope there is at the very least, a little bit less of a judgment than when you read a headline and you say, "Oh my God, this person set off a bomb because the lizard people told him to." If you're anything like me, you probably make a pretty snap judgment. But
Hmm.
60 minutes, do some further digging, uh, and you might feel a little differently. That's
Yeah.
the goal.
Exactly. You produce a lot, and producing can be fun. There's a lot of creative aspects of the job, and there's also a lot of unsexy elements of
Hmm.
producing. Are there any like on paper, like this is probably supposed to be really boring, but you kind of secretly like it, parts of
Yes,
producing?
yes. We just made a show called Penelope for Netflix,
Yep.
and it's a young adult show about a young girl who leaves behind the trappings of her modern life and runs off to live a life in the woods. And I wrote all 8 episodes of that show on spec, and I really thought I was gonna set the town on fire with a bidding war with the scripts. And I took them out, and everybody passed, and it almost killed me. But I was so passionate about it, I decided to take a bunch of my morning show money and the money I make producing and acting, and I made it independently. And I went to Sundance and I sold it back to Netflix, and it comes out tomorrow. And that is a part of the business that I think you could look at and be like, oh my God, what a slog. And it's so dangerous, so scary. But there's a vitality in that and a fight in that for the things that I love that I secretly kind of like, and as I'm in my mid 40s now, and it's like, I don't want to get complacent too much. I want to stay alive and stay vital. So I don't mind the gamesmanship and the fight in this business. It's part of what keeps me going.
I think when people start to get jaded and not have that drive, then you could tell in their work. So,
I think that's when
yeah.
you start to make bad art. And another thing I try to do is I try to collaborate with a lot of different people so that I don't repeat myself. So that my art might feel 50% the same because it is still 50% me, but then it will be 50% Natalie Morales that I made language lessons with, and give somebody else a shot to kind of take the driver's seat. That's a really fun way to keep your stuff fresh.
Yeah. And Amanda Peet and Sarah Paulson, I like when you collaborate with them.
Oh,
Um,
they're the
they're great.
best.
Amanda Peet was one of my first interviews, and she did
Oh,
not disappoint. She was awesome.
oh, she is unstoppably great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have to ask about the status of Creep 3. Is there a
Okay.
status?
Yeah, I can
Can-
give you the full status. Okay.
Awesome.
It's all been announced. So we made something called the Creep Tapes. Okay. This is a 6 episode television show. And I star in every one of them as the titular character. And it'll be coming out on November 15 on AMC Plus and Shudder. And same as Penelope, we went out and made them all independently so we could be as weird and insane as we wanted to be with no studio interference. And it was a genuine pleasure. We made them just like we make the movies. So it was great.
That is so wonderful. Mark, this has been wonderful. I really appreciate it. Really cool to talk to you. I learned so much.
Cheers, Emily.